Okay. Great. All right. I'm excited. Thanks so much. Well, we should let people in and then just start in a couple of minutes, right? Okay.
Go ahead and let people in. I'll do it. I'll get started.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll get started in a couple minutes. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started soon. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Really appreciate your presence. Welcome, everybody. Thanks all so much for being on time. We're just going to give one more minute for folks to trickle in and then we'll get started. In the meantime, I'm going to drop a website in the chat. It's our new website for Stop MVP Southgate. You can spend a little time on there while we wait for this one final minute for folks to come in. Thanks for being here. All right. We will go ahead and get started because there's such an exciting turnout here. Thanks for taking this Wednesday night to come and be with us, joining us for the Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate Extension info session and comment party. Before we get started, if anybody would like to use captions for this event, you can go to More, located in the bottom right of your screen, and select captions. And thank you all for being here. My name is Casey, and I am an organizer with Indigenous-led Climate Justice Collective, 7 Directions of Service, based on Occaneechi-Saponi and Yesa land in North Carolina. In today's session, we're going to focus on how to write and submit a comment to FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And we'll take some additional virtual actions together against MVP Southgate, that's the Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate Extension. And at the end, there will be an opportunity for folks in North Carolina to take action specific to our state. So our team at 7 Directions of Service and many people on this call live within miles of the proposed route of the Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate Extension. Southgate is a proposed 73-mile extension of the Mountain Valley Pipeline mainline, which would run from Pittsylvania County, Virginia, into North Carolina's Rockingham and Alamance counties. It would require a 3rd polluting compressor station to be constructed in a predominantly Black community near Chatham, Virginia. For over 5 years, folks here have been organizing against MVP Southgate Extension, and we've been successful. As many of you know, the Mountain Valley Pipeline mainline has just been fast-tracked by Congress and the White House by its corrupt inclusion in this year's national debt ceiling legislation. It's especially appalling due to the overwhelming public outcry against the pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline's over 500 violations and counting of permit conditions, laws, and regulations. However, the provisions that fast-tracked the MVP mainline did not include the Southgate extension into North Carolina's Rockingham and Alamance counties. Southgate developers still do not have the permits required, and just last week, North Carolina Congresswomen Foushee and Manning expressed their opposition to the pipeline. Governor Cooper has also been raising his concerns. Still, Southgate developers are taking steps to move the project forward, and that is why we are here tonight. Last month, MVP Southgate filed for an extension of their original certificate from FERC, which again is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. This is the certificate that would allow Southgate to begin condemning private property along the route through eminent domain. The public has until July 24th to submit comments in opposition, asking FERC to withhold the certificate, and that's what we're going to focus on tonight. And before we jump into that, we're going to take a pause right now and take a really simple action together. So we're going to drop into the chat a petition that is also addressed to FERC that is urging them to deny Southgate's request for an extension. This is step one for tonight. We'll all take a moment and sign the petition. And if you can take a second and personalize your comment. So we'll just pause, take that action together, and then we'll come back and we'll dive into writing comments to FERC. All right. All right, so that might not have been quite enough time. I apologize. We are going to keep moving. If you weren't able to get all of your thoughts out or you don't feel quite ready to submit, you can just save the tab and come back to it later. With that, I am going to pass it off to Ridge Graham from Appalachian Voices to discuss what to say in our comments.
Hey all, thanks for joining our comment party tonight. And thanks, Casey, for that wonderful introduction about the Southgate project. I'm going to go over what you would do if you want to submit a personalized comment to FERC directly to the docket. And later on, our colleagues at POWHR are going to discuss how you go about doing that. But just want to go over what the basics are of a comment if you don't do anything else, but you still want to submit a comment. What you should include are who you are, and include contact info so that FERC knows that you're not a made-up person or a robot. Also include, this is optional, but it's helpful, how Southgate will impact you or the area and why it matters to you. So even if you're not from the area, maybe you like to come here for recreation, you like to paddle or swim in the Dan or Hall rivers, you're interested in American history, and this is a area that you would like to see preserved, or you care about landowners along the route who would have their property taken away from them. But the most important thing after you include who you are is to ask FERC to deny the Southgate CPCN extension. And as Casey explained earlier, that extension is what gives them the power of eminent domain to take property away from people, and is the thing that they need before any other permits, and allows them to go forth and get things and then start construction on the pipeline once they have everything in place. And it's the most important permit and permission that they need. And it's important for them to lose it, so they have to go back to the drawing board. Next slide, please. And so if you would like to give more detail to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission about why, in fact, they should deny the certificate for public convenience and necessity that was granted back in 2020 to the MVP Southgate, there's a couple good reasons. And the way that we're framing this is using the language that FERC has used in previous extensions it's given to other projects. And the main one is MVP has not demonstrated good cause for an extension. This is the exact same language that they used when they granted MVP mainline the CPCN extension earlier this year. And as we said before, these are not the same project, and FERC should treat them separately. No pipe has been installed for this project. It's 0% complete. The next thing that you might want to include is that no reasonable progress has been made by MVP Southgate that would allow them to resume construction or begin it in the first place, because they haven't laid a single inch of this pipe. And so over the past 3 years that FERC has, that MVP Southgate has had this extension, has had this certificate from FERC. It tried to apply for a Clean Water Act permit from North Carolina. It was denied one and has since not made any attempts to get that permit back. 2 years ago, they applied for a Clean Air Act permit for the Lambert compressor station, which was also denied, and they have not since reapplied for that permit. There's nothing stopping them from reapplying for these permits, and it shows that they're not doing their homework and they aren't making a good effort to maintain this certificate of public convenience and necessity. The next thing you might want to say is that the findings of the 2019 environmental impact statement have changed. What the environmental impact statement is the document that FERC requires in order to issue the CPCN. And what this looks at is the impacts along the whole entire route. And over the years, what Southgate has been said that it will be and what it will probably end up being used for are no longer the same. Additionally, as part of the environmental impact statement, FERC looked into what existing gas was in the area, and MVP said that there wasn't enough and that's why Southgate was needed. Since then, over the years, Transco has made more upgrades and there's more gas available in the system, and also Congress has congressionally mandated MVP. And finally, the last thing you might want to say is that the MVP Southgate project is not in the public interest. Although there is a contract between the builders of the project and where the gas would go, and that's called a precedent agreement, which FERC uses to say that a project is needed. Various things have changed since then. Dominion, who owns PSNC, who is the only person who has said they would buy the gas from this project, has indicated to investment companies that they want to sell their gas infrastructure. So the only person who wants to buy it wants to get out of the gas owning business altogether. Additionally, NextEra Energy, one of the partners behind the MVP Southgate project, wants to sell its gas infrastructure holdings as well. So the people who are building it want to get out, and the people who want the gas from the pipeline also want to get out. This should indicate to FERC that the precedent agreement between the two companies should no longer apply. Additionally, as has been kind of floated around in various news places, there could be additional use for the gas in this MVP Southgate project to be used for energy generation, which is not what they originally said this project would be used for. They said that it would only be used for residential use, for turning on gas stoves or for home heating. Burning gas for energy generation will lead to more pollution emissions that are not accounted for in the environmental impact statement. And yeah, if anybody has any more questions, we'll go into a Q&A later. But before then, I'm going to hand it off to our good friends at POWHR, Grace and Russell, to go into how to submit an individual comment. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ridge. That was amazing. Really appreciate that section. So before we get into the FERC section, I am Grace Tuttle, she, her. I'm the advocacy director at POWHR Coalition, and POWHR is a grassroots frontlines organization made up of impacted community members along the Mountain Valley Pipeline mainline route in West Virginia and Virginia. But before we get into this FERC section, I would love if everyone could just take a deep breath, shake out your shoulders, just kind of roll your head a little bit, because this is about to be pretty gnarly and a lot of information. So just exhale all together. Okay, and I'm going to say it again. Please don't feel like you have to take detailed notes here. We're going to send you these slides. We'll send you a detailed guide. It might just be best to listen and absorb, because it's so much info and FERC is really difficult, notoriously difficult to navigate. So while we're actually, Jess, would you go back really quick? I apologize. So just a brief overview of what Russell and I will be going over. We'll discuss opportunities to seek help in public participation. We will discuss 3 modes of public participation that are applicable here in the Southgate certificate extension proceeding, and we'll go from sort of simplest to most complex. So e-comment, e-file, and then intervention. So we'll explain what all of those are. And thank you to whoever asked about what FERC is and what FERC does, because that is really important context that I sometimes forget to go over. So I'm going to put this link in the chat in case you want some bedtime reading about FERC, but really quickly, I will just say the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, is an independent agency, federal agency, that regulates the interstate transmission of electricity, natural gas, and oil. FERC also reviews proposals to build liquefied natural gas, or LNG, terminals and interstate natural gas pipelines, so MVP Southgate and MVP Mainline, as well as they license hydropower projects. So there's a whole list of other things that they do in there, but that's sort of the gist of it. And they have a tremendous amount of power, including giving corporations eminent domain, as we've discussed. So, all right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so FERC has now, excitingly, an Office of Public Participation, which you can contact. That is explicitly, this is from their website, what they are there for is to help you with this exact procedure. Note that we are still, grassroots groups are still walking you through the procedure, so things are not perfect yet, but please do reach out to them if you have further questions. They need to be there for the public, and also feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, and I'm pretty sure any of us would be glad to help you file or participate at FERC. So next slide, please. Okay, so like I said, we're going to start with the simplest, which is e-comment. You do not have to have a FERC account in order to use e-comment. And occasionally, FERC will not let you use e-comment for proceedings like rulemakings if they're changing one of their policies. But for something like this, a certificate extension, you can use e-comment. So if you're on the FERC website, you're going to go where that orange arrow is pointing you, where it says FERC Online. Next slide, please. Then you're going to click on e-comment, and it will give you a notice that it is taking you to a third-party site that is not secure. So you just have no choice but to go there, even though FERC is, that's where they're directing you. So, okay, if you're on mobile, you're going to hit that drop down menu. It's just going to look a little bit different, and you're going to go to e-comment. Next slide, please. And next slide. And again, okay. So here is where you would fill out these fields in order to be emailed a link that will then, once you fill out all these fields and you hit authorize, it will email you a link that will then give you access to the e-comment system where you can copy and paste in your comment. Now, very importantly here, please, 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 if you remember nothing else, create your comments, write your comments in a separate document, in a Word document, a Google document, whatever you prefer to use. Please do not use this system to draft your comment. It is notorious for crashing out, for disappearing. Please just type it somewhere else and copy and paste it in here. This is for filings that are less than 6,000 characters. And this is for individual filers. So if you're filing as an organization, you would want to use e-file. If you want to attach photos, PDFs, anything else, if you're intervening, you're going to want to make a FERC account and use e-file or intervene. So we'll get to that in a little bit. This is the simplest, just text, straightforward way. So next slide. Okay, so once you receive that email from FERC authorizing you to use e-comment, you will click on the link and it will take you to this lovely page, and you will search for the docket that you're intending to comment on, which in this case is CP 19-14-002, and we will definitely send you that, so don't worry. And once you search for that docket and find it, please make sure to click on the blue plus sign, which will actually add the docket where you're going to be commenting. Then your name should appear in the name box where it says comment, and then you will not type, but copy and paste your comment from your separate document into the box, and you will hit send comment. So next slide. Once you've done that, I just did this tonight just to verify that everything's working as it should. I got a verification email about 2 minutes after I hit send that it has been added to the docket. It was not yet there when I checked, but that is the typical procedure. And sometimes it takes a while for them to appear. So, all right. So next slide. Okay, so before we get into e-file, I just want to name a couple other contextual pieces here. For both e-comment and e-file, you will be required to enter a physical or mailing address. Apologies. And that typically does not show up publicly in your filings. However, if you are doing an e-file, if you're an impacted community member or landowner, or have another reason why you would want FERC to know that you are local to the project, or the address or the locality has some relevance to the project, it's probably in your best interest to include at least some of that information in your comments, like which locality you are from, if you're from an impacted community, especially. So that being said, everything that you type into any of these fields at FERC, including your address, which will not show up in your filing unless you put it there, is technically public. It is FOIA-able. So Freedom of Information Act, that anything you type into FERC can be FOIA'd. And anything that you type into your e-comment or your e-file or your intervention is automatically public. It is put on a literal public docket that is searchable and public 24/7. So just be aware of that. When you are filing, do not include any sensitive information, no social security numbers, nothing that you wouldn't want to be ultimately public. So that's kind of a tricky thing here. Okay. And there is not a way to undo your filings, at least that we know of. So just have that in mind. Okay, so e-file. This is a little more complex. I apologize, y'all. This is why we breathed. Let's breathe again. Okay, so e-file, you're going to navigate onto the FERC website. You're going to click on e-file. Next slide. And this is the mobile version again. Okay, so the difference with e-file is that you're going to need an account. So if you already have an account, then you would log in. If you don't yet have an account, you would click new user and go through the prompts to make an account. And let's see, apologies, got tripped up there. Okay, new user. All right, next slide, please, Jess. Okay, and one more thing about e-file, again, just as a reminder, if you are filing on behalf of an organization, if you have PDFs, photos, any larger attachments, more than 6,000 characters, or are using a motion to intervene, you will need to make a FERC account and use e-file in order to accomplish those. Okay, so this is how you make an account. You would fill in all of those fields. You would hit next, not done. Next slide. You would fill out that address and hit next. If you are not filing on behalf of an organization or a company, you would hit done and leave this blank. You would then get an email confirmation from FERC letting you know that your account has been created and accepted. Once you are logged into your account, this is what the FERC homepage looks like. So you would click on, actually, Jess, if you would stay on this one really quick, I'm just going to make one other note. You would click on e-filing, but I just want to tell y'all about one other thing. Once you make an account, underneath e-filing is e-subscription. You can actually subscribe to dockets through e-subscription without intervening. So if you wanted to follow every single comment or document that is filed to the MVP Southgate certificate extension docket, you can subscribe to that docket and click on e-subscription and follow the prompts in order to get email alerts. Okay, next slide. All right, so you've had an account, you've logged in, you've clicked on e-filing. At this point, this is the screen you're going to see. You are going to click on the word general. Next slide. Then you're going to click on comment on filing, Environ report, or TechConf. Then you're going to hit comment and then next. So next slide. Okay, now you're going to put in your docket that you are wishing to comment on, which in this case is CP 19-14-002, and hit search. Next slide. Okay, so we have our blue pluses again. There's your docket, but you want to make sure you hit that blue plus to add that docket as it being the one that you're going to comment on. So next slide. And this screen is going to show you what that looks like when you have hit that blue plus to select that docket. So next slide. Okay, so this is e-file. You are going to be uploading files, not copy and pasting text. So say you might have a Word doc with your comment, your actual text in it, and then you might have a couple PDFs with your photos. I do not think that they accept JPEG or other files here, so you might have to put things in PDF form. And you're going to leave that bar where it says public, you're just going to leave that as it is. So when you browse for your files here, you're going to select browse and hit, select your files and then hit upload. Otherwise, they will not actually be uploaded to the docket. So once you've uploaded your files, you're going to click next. Okay, so this is an example of, I just did this earlier as a test run. This is an example of what it looks like when you've selected a file. So I selected a random file, and you're not going to touch anything else on this screen. You're just going to hit next. And then it's going to ask you whether you're filing on behalf of another party or as an individual. Depending on that answer, you're going to select. I selected as an individual. Next slide. Okay, then it's going to ask you who the signer is. So I am the signer. I've entered my email, and I'm going to hit next. Then you're going to enter a description of your file. Just know that oftentimes FERC will change or alter or truncate this description. Hit next. Okay, then you're on your summary page, and you just want to verify all of this information. Verify the signer, verify the docket number, verify your description, verify that all of your files are uploaded. So there's my PDF. And then the last step here on e-file is to hit submit. So you would hit submit, and then you would get an email confirmation. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my incredible colleague, Russell. Thanks for bearing with me, y'all.
Thank you so much, Grace. Again, a lot to cover there. This next step is a little bit more complicated, has a few more requirements. So maybe, again, we'll all just take a deep breath together before we dive in to this section. The first thing that I do want to cover after we take our deep breath is what does it mean to intervene, who should intervene, and kind of what are some of the requirements of that. So first of all, intervening on a docket is typically reserved or open to people who have a more direct interest in a proceeding than, say, the general public does. For example, a directly impacted landowner or somebody not directly on the pipeline project route, but maybe adjacent to a property that is on the pipeline route, or whose water source is nearby, where they're not negotiating an easement directly with the pipeline builders, but there are a lot of associated risks with the project, and nobody else can properly address their concerns within this proceeding. So if you are kind of looking at the project route, looking at potential outcomes here, and make that determination for yourself that you should intervene, by all means do that. We definitely encourage people to intervene, and FERC will make a determination as to whether or not to grant you intervenor status. The note here on this slide is very important. It has been recommended to us that you intervene on the sub-docket CP 19-14-002. It's never a bad idea to sort of re-up your stated interest in the proceedings by following subsequent motions to intervene. And what that does is typically grants you potentially standing in any subsequent requests for rehearings from FERC, and should those rehearing requests fail, then potentially standing in any federal litigation, any proceeding in the courts where you might have standing and want to be able to testify or offer evidence in those proceedings. So that's a mouthful. Let's move to the next slide. And again, there are several steps that you can go through. One a little bit more detailed. We've covered e-filing, and you will want to use e-filing generally for most motions to intervene. So once you get back to e-file, you go to General. From there, rather than comment, you're going to move down to Intervention, select that, and select Motion to Intervene from the far right menu. Let's go next. Make sure that you enter the docket number as we covered in the previous portion. Hit the blue plus sign again and hit the next button. And then everything else is pretty much the same. You will take your motion to intervene document that you have pre-prepared and saved in a PDF file or a Word document. You will give that a description. You will click upload and then click next. And now you should receive a notice. I'm going to pause here very quickly because you should receive a notice eventually from FERC staff that your filing has been accepted. You will need to notify the service list when you intervene, and we'll cover that in a little bit. But a second option, somewhat less complicated, that's very similar to e-comment, is to file a docless or document-less motion to intervene. Again, you would go to General, select Intervention, but in this case, select docless from the right-hand menu and then click Next. Here is an example of text that you could enter into the docless intervention text field that kind of explains your role, explains why you believe you deserve intervenor status on this particular docket. It does not have to be lengthy, but you do want to include as much detail as possible, such as I am a directly impacted landowner, or my household relies on water that would be threatened by the pipeline project, or some other interests or individual rights that you think might be threatened and are not going to be represented by anybody else. Include as much information there, such as the docket number and so on. Type all of that into that field and then click Next. And again, you will be required to send a copy of your submittals, however you send them, to the service list. And this is where it does get kind of complicated and is an important step that sometimes gets forgotten. One of the reasons that I think FERC recommends that you use e-file is that when you notify the service list that you have submitted something, particularly if it's a lengthy document, when you notify the service list, you can attach that document. You are not required to do that. You can merely forward the email, the acceptance email that you get from FERC, but you can attach that document kind of as a courtesy. Particularly, there are a lot of advocates and there are a lot of organizers that are also on that list. It's not just lawyers from the industry or industry representatives there, and you may want to attach your document as a courtesy when you notify the service list. So to find the service list, you go back to FERC Online, and from the left menu, you can query the service list. You punch in the docket number for the specific docket that you are intervening on. You can select that and choose the options that you want to be able to download that list. Next slide, please. Once you have downloaded the service list, we recommend that you BCC or blind copy the list so that you're not blasting the entire service list emails out to a larger group. Copy in the acceptance for filing email that you have received from FERC on that docket, including the link that shows the document uploaded to FERC's e-library system. And then go ahead and attach your filing if you opted to do that, or if it's not something that you submitted through e-comment or docless intervention, go ahead and attach that document and forward that to that entire list and just hit send. And you have fulfilled that requirement of notifying the service list. I usually use a subject line like the one you see at the top of this slide, notice of service on the docket that we are sending this around for, and then hit send. Next slide, please. And I believe that wraps up my portion. I'm happy to answer questions about that. I know that is a somewhat complicated part of the process, so I'm going to drop my contact information and a couple of links to FERC's more helpful portions of their website that might provide additional information. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much. And with that, we are going to take about 10 minutes to field any questions and also give an opportunity if anybody feels like they really want to dive into creating a comment and getting that process going right now. Now is the time to do that. But like I said, about a couple of minutes, if folks have questions, I'll let anyone from the team who's spoken today respond.
Yes, thank you. I like to ask a question. It seems so complicated, very difficult. Is there anything we can do to duplicate the efforts? Like, let's say we want to support your efforts, but we're over here in Northern Virginia. Could we set up like a little booth or something by somewhere here so that we can inform the public? Because I know even for me that I'm very aware about these things and I look for information and I'm very supportive of no pipeline movement. You know, it's so difficult to navigate. It seems like they set up these systems so that it's difficult for us to, on purpose, you know, and it's, I don't know why, but it feels to me like anybody who files anything, we should also have it visual so people can see that this has been filed, you know, because I don't know, I think a couple of people said that we don't really trust whether they're gonna use our filings or change them around. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there to see if there's anything we can do to support you from here, from Northern Virginia, you know, in like a visual way.
Yeah, that's a really fantastic question and a great point. And I wonder if in your experiences on the Mountain Valley Pipeline mainline, if you have any advice for us about what POWHR is talking about.
Laura, thank you so much for that question. I can take a stab at this one.
Okay.
They definitely, you're absolutely right. The process is extremely complicated and not designed for the public to have access and
Yeah.
in the process at all. And I would say, so we created this comment party on the assumption that this comment period was actually supposed to end on July 7th. So we were originally operating on a much shorter timeline. And it's, you know, we fought for it to be extended and it was extended to the 24th. So that's still a short timeline. What I would suggest at this point, and Jess, Russell, anyone else, feel free to chime in, is to encourage folks to sign on to our shared petition, which will be submitted directly to the docket. It is the easiest way to get the biggest amount of people to comment, and you can actually personalize your comments on directly through that petition. So you don't have to deal with the FERC interface at all. And if that's just the best way, you could have that petition up on an iPad or a computer, and just, you know, if you're at a table, you could have folks continuing to sign it. You could print out a paper copy and have folks sign on dotted lines and then submit their information. So, you know, feel free to reach out to us if we can be helpful in any way about that. And I see that Russell's hand is up, so I'll defer to him too.
Thank you, Grace. Great idea. You will send us that link? Thank you.
Absolutely will. Thank you so much for your.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was perfect, Grace. And I would just add that for anyone tuning in tonight, this is a complicated process, and you have access to some of the best organizers focused on this particular part of the work here in this workshop tonight. So I would definitely link up with 7 Directions of Service and Appalachian Voices and POWHR, and we're dropping all of our contact information below. But I didn't even know, somebody early in the presentation tonight, again, asked, like, what is FERC? That's where I was 10 years ago, you know what I mean? So I've had to do everything that we've described here tonight, including subscribing to dockets, figuring out how to intervene. And it still drives me nuts sometimes. Grace talked about the system crashing, or not knowing if your comment actually went through, or what you can and can't comment on. And all of those things are very complicated. Just know that you're in very good company with over 40 people here on the presentation tonight too, taking an interest in these things. That is a really important first step, and take some time to get on the FERC website and kind of learn your way around. That's how so many of us got involved and continue to stay involved, and now throwing all of our support that we can behind folks organizing on the Southgate project.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, my name is Falah Al-Hadid, and I was basically commenting, and it's good to see that you were putting it on a petition. I would like to know that in terms of, since this is a gas line pipeline and it's going through a social economic disadvantaged community. How much emphasis is being put on the fact where the federal government has basically outlined in terms of the disadvantaged communities, the environmental impact, and so forth? How much of that is going into your petition or objection for them running now a pipeline of gas, which we're supposed to be doing conservation, reducing carbon, et cetera? How much of that is in your petition? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can speak to that. So I work with 7 Directions of Service, which is an Indigenous-led grassroots environmental justice focused group based in Alamance and Rockingham counties. And along with our coalition partners, folks who are speaking on this call, that aspect of the environmental injustices is extremely central to this fight, and especially in the petition as it relates to issues around the compressor station that would have been the 3rd to be placed in an environmental justice community in Virginia in order for Southgate to run. So there is a ton of emphasis on that. And yeah, you can find more information about some of those talking points and the centrality of that on the website that we've been mentioning, stopmvpsouthgate.com, that really breaks those down and how they're woven into our arguments. So if anybody else wants to add something, but yeah, thank you so much for raising that. And it's extremely important.
Okay, I will check out your website.
Hi, this is Nancy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I got the initial petition. I completed that you listed in the chat at the beginning of the meeting. And I understand how to submit a comment, but that other stuff, I mean, I got lost on. So how important are those, that second or that 3rd and 4th step?
Thank you, Nancy. I can take a crack at it to start, and then Russell, I'd love if you chime in on intervening. So just in a nutshell, e-comment is like, if you're a member of the general public, you're opposed to the project, maybe you live in the region, but you're not directly impacted, you have a few talking points you'd like to hit, you want to mention why this is personally important to you, and you have a short-ish comment that's appropriate for you. Next level, e-file, if you live in an impacted community or in the vicinity, if this is for some reason or any, universe of reasons, this is personally important to you, and you have—
Well, they took us to court under eminent domain. So, I mean, I've got—
Okay, that is—
Yeah.
Perfect context. Thank you so much. So intervention would be appropriate, and I will turn it over to Russell then.
Okay, so I have to e-file?
Again, you can use both e-comment and e-file. I think what you might want to consider, again, is the type of document that you are submitting. So if you have photos of your property, areas that are particularly at risk, those kinds of things that you want to include in a document, it is definitely, I think, a little bit simpler to produce that document, edit it, finalize that, and upload it, rather than to try to type all of that into e-comment. The intervention process, the intervenor process, you only have to do that one time, with the exception of notifying the service list. And I'm going to invite you to send me an email. I'm going to drop my email into the chat again to reach out directly. I will work on a brief template that is specific to the Southgate docket that can be shared after this call. There is a link to one that I dropped into the chat that can be useful for people who feel like they want to tackle that, but it does take a little bit more to kind of go through that one time. And if a little bit more kind of one-on-one hands-on work there would help. then I would invite you to reach out. Absolutely. And we can kind of walk through that, because I think that's the thing that FERC really ultimately needs to fix through the Office of Public Participation, and make that process simpler for people, because we shouldn't have to be regulatory lawyers to be able to make our case known and make ourselves heard.
So if I prepare a statement and get supporting documents, I can email you or somebody else on this call, and you'll help me submit the e-file?
Yes, you'll
Okay.
be so tired of me after the 24th.
No worries.
Or maybe I'll get invited to a picnic, but
Come on
let's get to know
down.
each other.
We'll go fishing.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh.
Maury, I see you have a hand up.
Well, this is Maury Johnson. I'm up here in Southern West Virginia. I'm part of the POWHR Coalition. People in North Carolina, this is your first rodeo. This. Rest assured that with 7 directors of the service and other people in your area, and the whole POWHR Coalition having your back, you are not alone in this. We have had too much experience dealing with this, and a lot of us will. And I'm actually willing to drive down to North Carolina so they need me to help do something. So just reach out to these people, App Voices and POWHR and 7 Directors of Service. If you have a question, we have your back. We're with you.
Oh,
That's
thank you
all.
so much. That's wonderful. We only have each other. That's it, you know?
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
And looking back through the chat here too, we had a question about a potential second location for compressor station. I've lost it now. Are there plans for a new place for a compression station? There are rumors on the mainline project, but I believe what MVP would likely do is stick with their current plan for the Lambert compressor station. Unless there's new information on that, I believe that will be what we'll be addressing. Grace has added that MVP has not applied for another air pollution permit as of this date for the Lambert station, so we'll be watching that on the Virginia side for sure. And it looks like Ridge, thank you, has answered the question about North Carolina DEQ. I see Grace has a hand up, so I'm going to keep scrolling through here and make sure we can get to folks' questions. Grace.
Yeah, thank you, Russell, and thanks everyone for answering in the chat. I just wanted to return again to the Lambert compressor station. And thanks, Jess, for all of Jess really diligently inquires with Virginia DEQ about whether MVP has applied for another air pollution permit. We have put in an inquiry at FERC as to whether if MVP were to change the location of the compressor station or change the compressor station from gas powered to electric turbines, what type of proceeding would they have to follow at FERC? Would they have to undertake a certificate amendment? Are they allowed to do all of this under their current certificate? So we're still waiting on some of those answers, but please, you know, call OPP, put these questions in the docket, you know, bug FERC as much as you possibly can about these questions. They absolutely need to answer these things.
Thank you. Gorgeous veggies, they're beautiful. Makes me want to go and do my veggies now.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for all your important questions. And like it's been said, we're all here for you. We're here for each other. You'll be getting all the follow-up emails and contact information. And before we close out tonight, we're going to go back to the slideshow. I want to highlight that before we close out, I want to ask folks in North Carolina to make time tomorrow to call Governor Roy Cooper's office. As I mentioned, he's been raising concerns about MVP Southgate, and there is a possibility that he will write his own letter to FERC the same way that we're doing that. but coming from him, it will also mean a lot. So if you could call the number, use this script, and yeah, say that you live in North Carolina. The office is open 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. tomorrow. Please make that call. It really will make a difference. And just want to say thank you again for being here. And I look forward to building relationships with y'all. And I hope to start doing that on Sunday, July 16th. We are having a No MVP Southgate event at the Haw River Ballroom, which is in Saxbahaw in North Carolina, Alamance County, right on the banks of the Haw River. It's a free event with a lot of information. You'll see a lot of us who have been presenting here on the call there to connect, to get your questions asked, to meet other folks who are in this fight. You can find more information at stopmvpsouthgate.com, as we've been mentioning. That can be your go-to for updates and news and resources and calls to action. So you can bookmark that page. And lastly, the very last thing for folks in North Carolina, just wanted to highlight a resource by the Haw River Assembly about important state level legislation. We've been talking a lot about the federal level tonight, but there is some important state level legislation that seeks to advance Southgate. And if you're willing to take a look at the link that we're dropping in, will also be included with our follow-up materials. It would really mean a lot. So thank you all again. And I look forward to meeting you and staying connected. And I hope you have a great night. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.